So we can start.
Wait lang.
May video eh.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. Let's start the press conference. Let's just make this quick. Let's go straight to the question and answer portion. We have with us Ambassador and then Mayor Joy, and then Mayor Aki Sawyer, and Ma'am Shruti. Who would like to begin? Okay, thank you, Ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kim from Today PH. What is the state of our climate status now as of today? I mean, in the world itself, not just in our country. Thank you. For anyone, thank you.
So I think fundamentally we're in the midst of a climate breakdown. You know, this is the decade of action. If you look at the UN Secretary General's call for action, you know, we're all committed on the 1.5 degree alignment of keeping our temperature to no more heating going above 1.5. Current estimates, they haven't been published officially, is that we're almost at either 2 or 3 degree trajectory on average, which means that some areas around geographically probably are even above that because it's an average. So in a nutshell, we're not in a very good situation from a climate perspective. We really need to cut our emissions, accelerate the emission reduction, very quickly, and really look at the lens of equity and resilience. Everybody knows that we've been facing climate disasters on a regular basis. The frequency has increased, and there are statistics that outline that someone to recover from climate disaster can take up to 20 years, and we don't have that kind of time. So it's really time for urgent action.
Okay, would you like to summarize? Or we can call another question. Can you please state your name first and your organization?
Good afternoon po. I'm Bian Manalo from PTV4. This is for anyone. C40 cities aim to fight or eradicate climate change, and one way of it is to the implementation of a zero emission area. So how C40 cities are implementing zero emission area?
So just to sort of clarify, C40 is a network of cities where the city leaders such as Mayor Joy and Mayor Yvonne have signed up to a high degree of climate ambition. So C40 doesn't implement zero emission areas. We provide data-driven, evidence-based support to cities to implement them, outlining the co-benefits that are there. And we've seen our chair, Mayor Sadiq Khan of London, take a very bold step in the US. And that has resulted in some significant impacts that have actually been documented on health and air quality. And also businesses have outlined an increase in economic prosperity from the US. But I would really like to request Mayor Yvonne to add to C40's work as a mayor and our co-chair on what we are doing around zero emission areas as well.
Thank you, Shruti.
Thank you, Shruti. So as she said, as C40 cities supports the cities themselves, and it's important for us to recognize that levels of emission differ depending on where you are in the world. So many of our colleagues in the global north have to have high emission reduction targets, doing so through something like ULEZ in London, but also some of our Scandinavian partners have very advanced policies which are reducing emissions from construction, for example, ensuring that they have greener construction, greener infrastructure, and refitting others that are already existing. In cities that are in the developing world, in a city such as mine, where our emissions are very low, Africa as a whole, as a continent, contributes less than 4% of greenhouse gas emissions. But that doesn't mean that when we're setting our targets for emissions reductions, we don't contribute to reducing emissions, even the little we have. So for example, whereas you might be having a low emission zone for transport, in our context, we are advancing afforestation, the planting of trees, to serve as a carbon sink. So we're taking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as our way of contributing towards net zero. And I'll say finally that the ambition of C40 cities is clearly seen in the fact that 70% of the C40 city members have more advanced climate interventions, are reducing emissions faster than their national government totals. And that's being done through a range of interventions according to our climate action plans, which set us high ambition targets by 2050.
Director, on the part of Quezon City.
On the part of Quezon City, well, first, was mentioned, that C40 cities are committed to urgent climate action. So one of the objectives, or the main objective, is to reduce or eliminate emissions. No? So as mentioned, the ULEZ, that's urban low emission zones, that's being done now in London through the leadership of Mayor Sadiq Khan, who is the co-chair of C40 in the Global North. So yung mga mayayaman na bansa. Pero may Global South at si Mayor Yvonne ang chair sa Global South. So tayo naman, what we're trying to do, number one, is we're experimenting. So in 2025, we will copy, kasi one of the goals of C40 is knowledge sharing among cities. We are going to start having our own urban low emission zones in Quezon City. Trying to replicate what Mayor Sadiq did, but adapting to our local conditions. Then second, we know that buildings, stationary structures contribute greatly to emissions. So we're also passing the enhanced green building ordinance. That's through the help of the UK government. That's through Ambassador Lord's assistance and of course C40. And this ordinance, when passed, will provide mandatory guidelines to all of the buildings, private buildings, as well as households, on how they can reduce their emissions through renewable energy and energy efficiency methods. And then in terms of transport, we started already with our Libreng Sakay that enables more people to ride one form of transport. And we are starting to electrify our buses. No? And we continue to build our bike lanes. So by the year 2030, hopefully we will have about 350 kilometers of bike lanes already. And we continue to promote that kind of active transport. And of course, waste management is another way that we can reduce our emissions. And we are now we have many initiatives now towards addressing waste management and lessening the waste that is deposited in our landfills and in adapting a circular economy throughout all of our communities in Quezon City.
Would you like to add?
Follow-up question lang po for Mayor Joy. Mayor Joy, ilang lugar po sa Quezon City ang binaha dahil sa paghagupit po ng bagyong Enteng at Habagat? Paano po makakatulong or ano pong impact nitong climate action implementation sa pagpapalakas ng flood control project sa QC?
Well, hindi ko alam kung ilan. Alam ko sa Carina, 93 barangays out of 142 barangays were flooded. And that's more than what we are used to with regards to flooding. So one of the things that is included in our agenda, not just emissions reduction, but also adaptation. So it's important for us to be able to ensure that our communities are resilient to this onslaught of typhoons, storms, flooding that is brought about by changing climate and extreme climate and weather conditions. No? So, kasama dyan yung pag-train natin sa mga communities natin, sa pag-evacuate ng maaga, pagsasagawa natin ng flood control project. So, Quezon City now has a drainage master plan. And I would like to stress that Quezon City, I believe, is the only city that has one of those. yung MMDA ata nagsisimula pa lang at yung DPWH wala pa rin silang drainage master plan for the region of Metro, but we already do. And it's just a matter of lobbying with Congress to help us generate the resources that is needed to probably konting national government funding, local government funding, so that we can implement this flood control projects that will minimize the flooding in Quezon City.
Okay. Good afternoon, I'm Jimmy Mendoza from DZR SMN Radio. Kay Mayor Ibon, what can you say about my mayor, Belmonte, climate leadership in Quezon City?
She's great. That's what I can say about your mayor. It's been a really inspiring couple of days already. In C40 City, as Mayor Joy has said, a good part, a significant part of what we are effective in doing is peer-to-peer learning. And I've been inspired in the last couple of days by the work that's being done with urban farming, by the work that's being done with the barangay, in terms of the leadership. Yesterday evening, I was this close to going to an evacuation center, only to learn that most people had gone home because the rain had stopped. But I was very keen and asked if I could join her, because as we sat at dinner, I could hear her planning to go and visit one of the evacuation centers. And that's what a mayor with leadership does. She makes sure she doesn't just talk about the work, instruct for the work to be done, but she goes out there and she sees that it's being done. I also had the privilege of listening in on her briefing that she had earlier in the day with her teams on Zoom, as they gave her updates, and she asked very pertinent questions. I was informed because I was eavesdropping about the trees that had fallen, and I listened as she said to them, I can't get to you, but please send me the link for the dashboard so I can see everything that's happening around the city. And at the end of the call, she asked for everybody to turn on their cameras so she could see that they were actually there. So your mayor is a hands-on, very practical, very committed and dedicated, data-driven, implementation-oriented mayor. And I'm proud to have her as a sister mayor.
Well, dahil siya yung boss ko, she's my boss in terms of the fact that we belong to the Global South. And of course, they choose the best mayors in the world to be the chairpersons of C40. So much of what we do, we have learned from Mayor Yvonne Aki Sawyer. I've seen her in action. I've heard her speak. I've seen we've seen on the internet. I did a lot of research about her life from the moment she was a young girl until she became mayor, and her future plans. And she, for me, is one of the most inspiring persons I've ever met. And her objective, she actually mentioned to me, I also read that she actually ran on a platform of climate action, climate change, because there was a landslide in her home city of Freetown. And it's because of the deforestation that occurred in her home city, and she felt that something had to be done. And I admire her courage and her bravery and her being out of the box as a politician and running on a platform when generally people think you cannot win on a platform of climate because climate is allegedly not a gut issue, but she made it a gut issue, and she showed that by planting 1 million and now 1.2 million trees in Freetown in 3 years. She was able to transform the city and transform many lives, especially the lives of the marginalized sectors like women, children, and those that are always left behind. And that is the essence of what we're trying to do. Inclusive climate action, kung saan walang naiiwan. Nagawa po yan ni Mayor Yvonne Aki Sawyer sa Freetown, and we hope na magaya natin yung kanyang ginagawa dito sa Quezon City.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Patrick Cruz from Rapier. I would like to follow up about the Mayor Joy's plan about urban emission zone. Can you further discuss that?
I can't actually further discuss it yet because we've put it, that's Andrea. She's the head of my climate change and environmental sustainability department, and we just put it on the budget. And we still have to plan out where to place these, how to implement them. So the first step is to just identify a budget that we are willing to spend, that hopefully the city administrator and his financing does not slash during the budget hearing. But then since climate is a priority in our agenda of governance, tingin namin hindi naman masa-slash. So we will give you more information once it's been approved and once we're ready to implement it.
Okay. My other question is for the two mayors. So earlier you highlighted the significance of the communities in fighting climate change. Specifically, how do you include the communities in your project, specifically for the Freetown Mayor with your Freetown, the Tree Town project, and the other projects of Mayor Joy, so there's Joy of Urban Planning and many more projects?
So we involve the communities by collaborating with them, consulting with them in the design. So the start of the design of any climate intervention, in fact, any intervention at all, because all our interventions will have a climate lens, will have a community lens. I'm a firm believer, as Mayor Joyce said, I ran for office because of climate change. But the experience I had just prior to running for office was when we had an Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone, and I volunteered to be part of that response. I went for 3 months, ended up staying for a year and leading the strategic response department, the design of the response. What I learned through Ebola, where you had to change people's behavior and cause them to do things differently to norms and traditions, was that unless the community internalized and led, you weren't going to succeed. I was once told by a WHO doctor from Uganda who had been in many Ebola outbreaks in East Africa. He said to me, don't tell people what to do, talk to them under the mango tree. And that has always stayed with me, that you need to actually have people engage and take ownership. So what we do with everything at City Council, with us at Freetown, is to have people in the room, whether it's the Slum Dwellers Association, whether it's the market women to talk about heat action, whether it's youth to talk about youth interventions. We always start with the voices of the people. Nothing for me without me. I'm a firm believer of that. And so that's how we do it. Involve them in the design, involve them in the implementation, make sure it's their intervention. You can't impose and succeed. You can only succeed if what you're doing is owned by the people for whom you're doing it.
So I just want to second the motion of Mayor Yvonne that the people must have ownership over the program or the project. And I guess the example I would like to give is the Joy of Urban Farming program, which we started way back in 2010. But because the people did not feel that it was an urgent program, very few actually adopted that particular project. Now, although we were doing a lot of education, seminars, etc., forum, we provided the seeds, but because they did not feel that they owned that project, it did not take off. But during the pandemic, when there was really that need for food security, when food was not readily available, when people were in dire straits, okay, the project really took off. And from having very few farms, we have now 1,300 farms now. And it was really because of the need. So the need actually created that desire among the community to do something on their own, and they adopted urban farming. And the city was there to enable this this ambition of the people to see it to fruition. So we were there to support them. But the growth of these farms, hindi na yan nanggaling sa amin. Sa tao mismo nanggaling. At kami lang ay naandun para bigyan sila ng tulong at suporta na kailangan nila para mas ma-expand yung program. No? So I guess that's my example of the trees of Mayor Aki. Mayor Aki, sorry.
Okay. Last question.
Last question. You earlier mentioned, Mayor, that Mayor Aki Sawyer run with a platform of climate change. And do you think is it possible for the Philippines or local leaders to to run under this platform of climate change, given that we have the 2025 elections coming next year?
Can I make a clarification? So, I don't go around, I didn't in my first election in 2018, go around saying, I'm running on climate change. No, I talked about what Mayor Joy talks about, the things that affect people. So we were suffering from floods. We had a terrible landslide. We have air quality issues. We have housing in informal settlement constraints and issues. So climate affects lives. And when you want to campaign on a climate agenda, you talk about the impact of climate change as opposed to the notion of climate change. So just to clarify that I didn't have boards saying climate change champion, no?
So thank you. That's my answer. So no, just to follow through from what Mayor Yvonne said, you cannot. I believe that that climate change per se will not win you any votes, but you have to break down climate change into its individual parts, and then you will. People will realize that climate change does affect my life in an integral way. It's a gut issue because the changing climate affects food security. Changing climate affects, like we said, heat. Changing climate affects the frequency of strong and adverse weather conditions like typhoon storms and floods. And changing weather conditions or changing climate affects health. And changing climate affects education because now walang school. And just earlier, Ambassador Laura was telling me how disturbed she was at the frequency that classes are suspended in our city. And probably I would add the need to be more resilient also in teaching our children, given that this is the new normal here, no? That the weather will always be this bad. So what can the education sector do to adapt to this and not sacrifice the learnings of our children, no? So, and then you realize these are all gut issues. So, but these are all related to the climate, no? So, part of your campaign has to be able to just not talk about the gut issues as separated from climate change, but that they are connected, so that people have to start caring about doing their part to reduce emissions, because this is probably the root cause of why there are so much crises going on around their lives.
And if I could just add as well, that you can also identify and highlight the opportunities that climate action brings, opportunities for creating jobs, opportunities for improving economic productivity. So earlier on you talked about ULEZ, and with us in Freetown, we are introducing a cable car as a mass transit solution. That cable car will significantly reduce our transport emissions, but it'll also reduce traffic time. It'll travel time across the city from 2 hours to 15 minutes. Which means economic productivity will be increased, informal settlements will be better connected. So focusing on the opportunities, and I think that's something that shouldn't be missed. Climate change is a major challenge, but the response to climate change can really create opportunities for the creation of good green jobs in our cities.
Yes. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I've attended so many climate events related to climate change. And everyone is saying that from climate change is already climate crisis. So do we believe we should have time to do all this planning, all these talks? Maybe we could do. Why can't we just do? We implement or copy the best practices that works from other countries. For example, in the Philippines, what works in BGC. I think BGC is the only one that wasn't flooded during the recent typhoon. And maybe we could just copy what works from those countries, from those places, and then implement them so we can act faster. And for example, I've heard Mayor Joy said that the bike lane implementation will be by 2030.
300 kilometers. We already have about 175 kilometers of bike lane.
So it will be finished by 2030.
By all of it, no? 2028. He's the transport planner. Let me ask you.
2028, ma'am, by the time you're done now with it.
2028, 350 kilometers.
So that's 3 years pa po before it's done. So maybe we could probably act faster because all this talk, all this planning, if we can copy some from other countries, from other places that works, maybe we can do it faster than doing from scratch.
Yeah, I'll start and others will complement. Look, time is not on our side.
Yes.
Time
yes,
is
that's
running
it.
out. We are in a climate crisis.
Correct.
Every day matters. Every year matters, which is why this is the decade of action. So this is not the decade of talking and agreeing. Thankfully, those days are behind us. We all know that climate change is man-made, and we all know what needs to be done to fix it. So this has got to be about action. What you're talking about in terms of acceleration is what we all want to see happen, and it's exactly why C40 is bringing mayors together to learn from each other. So the peer learning that we've just been hearing about across these cities that are leading, but across the world. So really, we want to be as empowering mayors and leaders to take immediate action. That needs to be done at the cities level because cities are increasingly representing a majority of the world's population, but also because they are of the right size where they can innovate on the one hand and listen to their communities and work hand in hand with their communities. So that is absolutely critical. That also needs to go hand in hand, of course, with the actions of governments at the national level that have to take difficult sometimes decisions, but urgent decisions to reduce their emissions. Hence the fundamental importance of net zero targets and legislating for that where possible. The UK has done that, for example. So we have committed to a net zero target, and then we need to deliver on that commitment. I'd like to come back to the first question on the Philippines, which was more broadly on climate change in the world. There was a seminal report produced by the World Bank about a year and a half ago on climate change and development, based on years of analysis and data that said that unless the Philippines adapts to the unavoidable impact of climate change, it's going to cost about 14% of GDP by 2040. So this is a reality here, right? And that's by 2040. Imagine the cost to your economy if you don't adapt. So this is why driving forward these initiatives, such as what we're hearing today, is absolutely critical. And there are key sectors in which to do that. And it's not just, a nice to have. It's not just to support the more vulnerable, the marginalized communities. It is for all of us, and it's absolutely urgent, and we should be clear. But what I don't want us to do is to just feel paralyzed by that fear and by that data, because action is possible, and it's already making a difference on the ground.
Yeah, I was just a bit concerned that we should be doing double time on working about this climate crisis. Yeah.
We agree. Yeah, let's do more. Let's do more together. And back to the political question about what it would take for political leaders to say yes, I'm campaigning on climate. That's also possibly about whether citizens and voters demand that their elected officials prioritize this issue, and then you'll get the leaders that you vote for and that respond to your demands.
And I just want to add, on the copy, the C40 is a network of 100 cities, right? And we believe in peer learning. And we've been doing this for over decades, right? We're bringing together mayors to learn from each other, but also what didn't work. So you can't just take something from somewhere and copy. There has to be a process of understanding contextuality and how it works. So it has to be locally led action as well, right? So that's very important. And, we've been hearing the two mayors, over the last 2 days, and there's so much that they're doing. And just imagine if they didn't do all of that and the impact, right? So it is moving along. And I just wanted to add to what Ambassador said. The question is, would everyone here vote for climate? Would you vote for getting better air quality? better health because of climate impacts. And once that starts converging, we will, we'll really see action accelerating.
So maybe guys, you can share some practices that we can do for the Philippines based on your observation from the Philippines. Have you been around the Philippines?
Mayor Joy is one of our leading mayors in Asia Pacific that's been driving climate action. We have C40 has a sort of a knowledge hub where we share best practices. It's accessible to everyone actually. It's a database where we post our best practices across the world on topical issues. And I just want to say and applaud to all the work that Quezon City has been doing that's there already on urban farming and many other initiatives around green jobs, etc. And we're continuously available to support the city and Mayor Joy to take things forward.
No, I meant upon your arrival in the Philippines, what was your first observation? What do you think should the Philippines do to help in the to fight climate change or climate crisis? Have you seen the?
Well, I mean, we made.
No, personally, just your observation, your own observation. Let's say you just got from the airport, right? And then you went to the venue, and then
I think
what have you observed?
Yeah, I mean, this is so. I really think that there is maybe a significant.
Sorry, I missed specific.
Yeah, so to me, I think one of the things, and I don't know if the panel would be great to hear from everyone their experience, would be looking at maybe the mobility issues, right? There is a lot of traffic, and there's a lot of time that goes in traveling, and there's a lot of economic impact, health impact on that. But that also depends on citizens kind of moving to better modes of mobility, right? Like Mayor Joy outlined the bus lanes, etc., and walking, pathways and bike lanes. Are people transitioning to that? So that was my, quick experience from airport to the hotel, that there could be a better resolution to traffic.
How about Ma'am Yvonne Aki?
I think she's only here for a few days, so it may not be a fair assessment. Okay, can we have one more question? One or two more? Yeah, okay.
Congratulations. I'm Ms. Horizon Chaser, HMSQs. Mayor, gusto ko po yung advocacy niyo ngayon. My questions, what is your call or message to other cities in relation to this climate crisis? Thank you.
Well, I'm hopeful that the other cities will also put the urgent climate action as at the top of their agenda of governance, and I hope that some of the candidates for mayor, for senator, for congressman can include urgent climate action in its various broken down forms as a part of their agenda when they run. And I hope that the people of our country will be more discerning when they choose their leaders come May 2025 and ask the right questions and choose potential leaders that are going to put climate action as part of their platform of governance.
Okay. Quick questions na lang, ha?
Okay. Good morning po. Any of you can answer. I'd like to get your reaction regarding the disaster that happened yesterday because of the quarrying effect, the negative effects of quarrying in some mountains, like the Rizal province.
Yeah.
The floods that had taken place yesterday that claimed lives of some of the Filipinos. Is there any recommendation that you would like to make?
Medyo far-fetched po, no? Local university po, medyo yung quarry, hindi pa natin napapatunayan, medyo mahirap. Then, can we have one more? Last na. Sorry, medyo we're running out of time.
Good afternoon, everyone. What I would like to ask a question is, among the real problem ng climate change climate change effect in our country or in the world, what is the foremost problem that we have to attend to immediately?
Maybe that's the
parting words also for okay.
I think the number one impact, in fact, the data shows that the number one killer, and it was confirmed this morning, is extreme heat. It's a silent killer. It disproportionately affects women and the elderly, and it's one that often is not considered because it's not as visible as the flooding or the landslides or the fires. In Freetown, we have appointed a chief heat officer, and we developed a heat action plan, and that includes taking heat monitors or monitoring heat levels across the city, identifying heat islands, and then trying to develop heat mitigating interventions such as market shade covers for women working outdoors, cool roof systems for people in informal settlements. A lot of these are still at pilot stage, but we recognize the importance of addressing heat. So I think the starting point for us is having a dedicated staff member, the chief heat officer, whose job it is to get the data and help us build in the interventions with the support of the people. I would also say that we must not take our eyes off reducing emissions, particularly from the countries that are the biggest emitters. The advocacy, the shouting from the rooftops needs to continue even as we deal with the impacts that are happening in our part of the world.
I would say that the climate crisis is something that is very urgent, that has to be addressed, but it has many parts. Okay, addressing it requires has many avenues, and I think planning is very important. You cannot just choose one aspect and try to address it without proper baseline data and without a good plan of action, because you will just be wasting funds. No? So the first step I would take, which is the first step Quezon City did, was to have a local climate change action plan with very specific actions, very specific targets, very specific goals, and with funds, with magkano ba ang bawat action na ito. No? So we actually already know how much it will cost for us to reach our climate target of net zero by 2050. It's $1.5 billion. No? And our plan contains all of the different actions needed for us to reach net zero by 2050. Pero ang problema, syempre, saan natin makukuha yung $1.5 billion na kailangan ng lungsod Quezon pa lang yan. So, one thing that we're trying to do is, of course, lobby for support from international financing institutions. But secondly, we ourselves, we don't want to be dependent anymore on external funding. Nakikita natin ang hirap, umasa sa iba. So we ourselves declared a climate crisis in Quezon City as early as 2019, as a result of which we created the Climate Change and Environmental Sustainability Department. So we are the only local government unit in Quezon, in the Philippines, that is with a department dedicated to just advocating against climate change or to address climate change. And then we were able to allocate, because of all these actions, at least 13 or at most 13%, and that's big, of our city budget is now dedicated towards urgent climate action. So these are the steps that we have taken.
I just want to come in on the back of Mayor Joy. Mayor Joy, you said it was Mahir to find the $1.5 billion, which is right. But two things to say on that: if it's 1.5 billion today, it will be more tomorrow, and even more the year after. So now's the time to act, and you make savings now, because the cost is going to increase with time. Number two, you're absolutely right. This is the responsibility of countries that have emitted and are emitted to support access to finance and climate finance in particular, and we are not shying away from that responsibility. And there are dedicated international climate funds that are there to support cities and governments that have got that absolute clarity of purpose and that are razor sharp and evidence-based and data-driven in their plans. So I think that's really important to say. And last, to answer the question directly, I very much agree with Mayor Joy. You cannot choose just one sector or one priority. The government of the Philippines have developed and indeed launched in the last COP the last UN climate change conference, its first national adaptation plan, which looks across sectors. It looks at what will sadly unavoidably be more extreme weather events. It looks at agriculture, it looks at water, it looks at transport, and it says these are the things that have to happen in these sectors. But you can't look at each of them separately, because you don't then think about the synergies and the interdependence, and you can't make strategic trade-offs. So I think a comprehensive, integrated approach is absolutely essential.
I'm sure.
And I just want to add, I mean, I think the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, I think the most critical thing is an accelerated reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. We need to transition away from fossil fuels immediately. And I think that's absolute priority for the world right now. And then, I mean, I think the panel has clearly outlined that the action that you need to take now, in addition to reducing, your fossil fuel emissions, is cross-sectoral. It will be different everywhere, but it's important that the lens of governance now needs to become climate, where all decisions that any government is taking has to be from the lens of climate, and we need the national governments to act. We have seen the cities have acted. We have fantastic examples on ground, but we need the national governments now in sort of the lead up to the NDC revisions to sort of come and work together with our city leaders in committing to taking action now, because this is the decade. So that's it.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry to cut the press conference because we have another session downstairs. So